Sit down. Welcome to the meeting. Just there's one extra thing, which is I'm suggesting. I hope this is okay with the leader on agenda item 7, the Little District 2050 strategy. You could slip in the reference to the local government review there, if that's okay. I was asked if I would be okay for an update on that. I'm sure everybody would want that, and I would have mentioned the pre-meeting hardly, and I remembered. That's that. Apologies for absence. First of all,
yeah, we've had apologies from councillors. Field.
are there departures? Okay, well there you are. Declarations of interest. Anybody has or thinks they might have later on, please say. Yeah, for that one, yeah. I've offered cakes that may bring back memories of Marcel Proust and others. So the next item is to say again to members, declarations of interest. Have members got any declaration of interest? They now suddenly find they have when they come tonight. Thank you. It could be controversial. Minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. On page 4, on the housing and homelessness strategy, I think we should record our thanks to the staff team for all the changes they made to that strategy before it was published, the ones that we all asked for at the meeting, particularly on social homes. But we didn't at that meeting have the opportunity to look at the delivery plan. I've taken it on myself as the shadow cabinet for housing and the local plan to talk with the staff team about that, and they've agreed to share that with me, and I've asked that it be shared with before it goes public. I think that's objective to the court.
Well, that's completely out of order. None of us heard that, so thank you.
I did, so I'm going to support what Councillor Ball.
That's trying to be helpful here.
I think that was a really good piece of scrutiny. We were able to comment in detail. I suppose my question is, were all of the comments incorporated? I haven't done the cross-reference. Colin clearly has, but you know,
As I could see,
like the question that you made before is, what are we here for as an overview and scrutiny committee? Do the lead members actually take on board what we say, or do they just tick a box and say we've taken this to overview and scrutiny's job done? So, you know, just getting assurances that those suggestions were all incorporated would be really helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I did actually go through these just briefly at the council meeting, at which you were in attendance, and others. I just want to point that out. I did draw attention to these notes at the time. Okay. Are the minutes agreed by this committee? Not agreed by the council. Yeah. Thank you. Agenda item 4 then, there's the notes from task groups. There's just the one task group at the moment, although we've got the public transport task group. We're meeting very soon once we get the initial meeting out of the way and look in more detail at the subjects. We've had I'm pleased to say, particularly for Miles, might be interested in this, or be particularly interested in this. We've had a request for the website of a particular issue in public transport, so that's good. We've got one there that actually is something that we can look at, and is perfect timing for that public transport task group. So we'll do that. Leona's not here to report on it. In fact, you're the only one. So, did you want to say anything on it?
Yeah.
Member of the task group.
Yeah, I think it was a really useful session that we had on both the birthing unit at Samuel Johnson and also on the Burnwood Health Centre, though the health centre one was less useful in the sense that the key people who were making decisions weren't at the centre briefing, and I don't think we've had any further update on that, though I've had a number of questions. Just on the further work required and next steps, Councillor Doherty from the County Council was sort of helpful in saying she'll get answers to all of these questions, but I don't know whether we've had them. The task group took place on the 1st of July and we've not heard anything yet, and the same is true about an update on Burnwood Health Centre. I don't think we've had that, you know, and these issues just keep going on and on and on. So I wonder, yeah, looking at Will, really, I wonder if those could be chased up so that we can get substantive responses as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if we could ask Will if he could do that, or if that's the notes said there. Also to point out the consultation on the Samuel Johnson maternity unit is open till the 3rd of August, so there's still time on that to put your views forward. Anne, and then can you put that to you first?
I just want to say just a comment really, but that as someone we discussed whether I should declare an interest, and you told me I shouldn't, but I should say I've been to the consultation, I've been on the demonstration against the removal of the opportunity to give birth for a local women to give birth in Samuel Johnson. And on page 10, members asked about the sincerity of the consultation with only one option outlined as viable. I think it's quite hard to argue that's a decent consultation when something's been left as closed temporarily and then,
I can understand that, but that was my
concern. So I'm just making that as a comment, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying as my comment on your comment is that I was concerned about that as well, but there was only one realistic option if you look at the papers. There are a lot of papers, but I would recommend reading those papers on the reasons for coming to that conclusion.
You perhaps assuming I haven't read the papers.
No, I'm not assuming it.
But I might.
You may have read them. I read lots of things and then actually miss things. Councillor.
Yes, thank you. I have read them. There's two things really. I'm concerned about the fact that there's only one option. It seems to me that is partly cost driven, because what we're talking about is a choice for women in the area that's served by Samuel Johnson. Nobody is saying that they have to go there. People who are at high risk, women who are high risk can go somewhere else. Where it says about the increasing number of mothers in high risk categories on this report, was anything said about the population of young people? Because over the next 10 years, with the house building, there's likely to be a bigger population of childbearing age, and that, to my mind, needs to be taken into account as well.
I've seen that in the reports, but
yeah, that it was brought up. That was one of the issues about the number of new builds, but in a sense this is a county-wide issue, because the consultation is county-wide about the birthing unit. It's not just at Samuel Johnson, which is where our interest is focused, but at Stafford County Hospital too, and looking over that sort of bigger picture. There are all sorts of issues raised around the age of first-time mothers, particularly the increase of conditions such as diabetes, which can cause difficulties at birth. So you're absolutely right. The number of births that would take place without any contraindications at Samuel Johnson is reducing, and hence the throughput isn't what it was. I think I was reassured, particularly by the individual officers who were conducting this consultation and conducting this presentation to the task group. They do seem absolutely committed to having an open mind, and let's have everyone's views. I think it's much more difficult when you get to strategic level, because the data and the information and the risk factors and so on, it does seem just point to one conclusion, and that's where the difficulty arises. I was grateful to Councillor Henshaw as a now retired medical practitioner to give us some insight into the relative risks associated with home birth, birth in unit birth, or general hospital birth. So that was very helpful. But I was convinced that it was a genuine consultation, though it doesn't appear to be when there's only one option that the ICB have put forward. Those sort of factors, such as women giving birth at a much later age than used to be the case, that's a significant sort of risk issue, and I think we've got to sort of understand that that's going to be the case. What I hadn't realised, I don't think, before that meeting was, you know, this was always about closing maternity services at Samuel Johnson Hospital. If you like, the crumb of comfort that we were given was that the intention is to increase maternity services there. So postnatal, antenatal support, support for things like postpartum psychosis and so on. The intention is to get those services based far more locally at Samuel Johnson than was the case before. It is just that birthing unit issue, which I know is exercising a lot of people at the moment.
Which has been closed since COVID, but we're talking about not reopening it after the IDBs.
It's still reopenable. That was another assurance we were given, that it hasn't been mothballed.
No.
It is still sort of
Still cleaned and
maintained. Yeah.
Councillor Marshall, Tom Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, apologies for being late, everyone. I didn't realise there was.
Just explain to Councillor Marshall, he wasn't late. He may not have got the information about our pre-meetings that we have.
Thank you.
But he's certainly not late for the meeting.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Without declaring an interest, because my sister-in-law, yes, she used to be a midwife there up until 2 years ago, so she isn't currently in this. So I'm not going to declare an interest. But having spoken with her on numerous occasions, I do know that, and I'm sure you all know as well, that giving birth seems to be getting ever more complicated, ever more problems which can come along, and also the general public's propensity for litigation. And my sister-in-law couldn't wait to give up her job, not just so that she could take the pension, but because she found it incredibly stressful and very, very worrying when she saw some of the complicated situations which could have landed some of those staff in hot water. So I think, actually, unfortunately, rather than having a local facility, which I think we all think would be advantageous, in the real world, it's absolutely essential that you've got very, very sophisticated backup, which you would only probably get in a large hospital. So it saddens me that possibly we could be looking at the closure of that unit, which I think is in many ways counterintuitive. But I think in the real world and practically, hospitals almost need to centralise their maternity services, because smaller hospitals often find themselves left wanting in terms of emergency care. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, there's that problem that if somebody at the around this, Samuel Johnson birthing unit found they had to go and get more care elsewhere, the ambulance takes them, husband, whatever, would be the one be following in a car. There's one small thing there, but there is that change there. But there was a problem with lack of midwives, which they've had a recruiting campaign there, and actually there is more midwives. They've got like excessive midwives now, so I don't know where that argument fits in anymore, but there was that problem there. Midwives didn't want to go there because they didn't get the experience, and so on. Just to some background there. Councillor Whaley-Owen then. I think Paul, Councillor Ray.
Thanks, Chair. I came to the meeting with a list of concerns, but a lot of them have already been addressed by members. The two that haven't been addressed yet is when I looked at a map of where mothers can give birth in the county, Stafford and Samuel Johnson are kind of towards the centre. So when we take those away, the only real other alternatives are kind of on the outskirts of the county as well. So for those mums who are living, you know, in this particular area, they'll have to travel to places like Burton, Wolverhampton, Walsall, which is a lot further, but obviously Lichfield as well. So obviously that's going to be an inconvenience for local mums around here as well. Another thing is that Samuel Johnson has a great reputation, especially with pioneering in water births as well, and was even used to train midwives, not only locally, but also from further afar as well. So we've taken away that training and education from to be midwives. Those are the two concerns that I kind of had. Obviously, the others have been mentioned already.
I'm just asking, will you put that into the consultation? You've got time on the.
It's already been it's already been put in, and my wife has already put it in as well.
Great. Councillor Paul Ray, then Councillor.
Yeah, I was just going. I'm not prejudging the consultation, but if the decision is made not to reopen, then there's a great facility there, and the report does reference making use of better use of the city. We're bringing other services in, and there is a government policy to bring services closer to the community. As a council, we need to be, if that's the decision that's made, lobbying hard so that we're bringing diagnostics, physiotherapy, whatever it might be, especially bearing in mind we've got a population is getting older, and here we've got the demographics in that direction, which makes it it's not convenient for everybody to go to Good Hope or to go to Burton when you're of a certain age. So we've got a modern facility, and if the decision is made not to have reopen that, we need to really lobby hard to have other services in there.
Make sure they relate to the task group members. So, Anne,
I
please.
don't want to hold us up too much about something we've got no direct control over, but I just want to say a few words in reply to Councillor Marshall, I'm afraid. The consultation I went to, which was, I think, one of the later ones, which was very well attended, a very large proportion, perhaps a third of the people who were, you know, the people from the health service were midwives who'd worked at Samuel Johnson and who were heartbroken that they weren't going to be able to carry through from, you know, prenatal checks to looking after women or being with women when they actually gave birth. And the other point is we assume that hospitals are safe, and there is a massive crisis in obstetrics and gynecology in the paper today. You know, the notion that you're going to be safer in Burton or Nottingham or Walsall General Hospital giving birth, even if you're an old fat woman who seem to be they're being blamed for this sort of. And as you know, I was an elderly mother, so I take exception in some ways too. But the statistics seem to be, you know, rather skewed. But you know, we won't go there. But we're not talking about a wonderful hospital service for giving birth against smaller hospitals and local. Probably not so much our business.
Okay.
Just to come back on that, of course, this is the meeting took place just after the announcement of a national review of maternity services, and we asked about that, but there wasn't enough information at that point. But I think that context is important, because the national review wouldn't have happened had there been fewer massive failures in services in general hospitals. So, you know, that's another thing that needs to be we need to keep an eye on.
Okay. Is there any idea when the task group might meet again? I mean, the next steps, but you don't get any information. We can start a meeting, or they can do a meeting.
About that as chair.
Yeah, I was wondering if you've been talking about it.
We haven't discussed any.
No, sorry. Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the next item, which is the health matters. This is the my report and other information from the Health Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee at the county. There was going to be the second meeting this new term, as it were, was going to be yesterday, but that's been postponed to the 31st because they need more information. Well, the ICB representatives needed more information on the operational plan to come and give a report on that. But my report is there. Colin, please.
I spotted a couple.
Don't be technical, is it? Oh no, you're on about. Oh yeah, you're not on about my report. No. Yeah, go on.
Your report, perfect, but there's a couple of errors in the
Yes.
in the county council report. You may want to take back to them. The first was on page 14, page 2 of their report, item 10. They talk about the Quality Act 2010. I think they mean the Equality Act, because I don't think there's any such thing as a Quality Act, and you think they've picked that sort of thing up. Also on page 20, although he was clearly on the money and getting re-elected as a county councillor, the name is Colin Gretorix on page 20, not Coin Gretorix.
Oh yeah.
With a look, I better point that out as well. On
Speaking as one
county, yeah, Colin Greatrix, I know he was definitely there. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good. Just I don't know what's the YouTube of this. Otherwise, they'll know it wasn't my spotting it. It was Colin Balls. Thank you. If there's no questions then, thank goodness, because most might have been technical. Youth council engagement in Lichfield district. Now I do have lots of various papers here. Yeah, you're going over there. You're gonna okay on the other side. I do have a copy of the proposals for a youth council where it said that updates be reported to the committee. This was in July, 19th of July 2022. Updates be reported to the committee during the pilot scheme. That other authorities be looking for best practice ideas to help ensure key stage 3 and 4 pupils are elected, ensure there is enough support from officers, including outreach work, the inclusion of special educational needs schools be considered, and I think so there were lots of ideas for the proposed youth council, which did get a cabinet, and then we have the situation that we have. If you look at the report, tried to relaunch, but that didn't work either. But the cabinet member, presumably, Richard, do you want to start up or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what I want to say is that the report is obviously self-explanatory in itself. It's something that obviously we felt at the time that we wanted to see how we could do a youth council. The initial responses to attendance was good. Interaction was good. Subject matter was very much their agenda. It wasn't our agenda. But as time went by, that enthusiasm dropped off. And as much as you try and look at it, if you can't bring the participants to the table, then we've got to look at different ways maybe to go through it. So we did put a temporary hold on to its proceedings. And in doing so, I have to thank Will Stevenson and Fiona Bell. Went out with a lot of effort to try and capture further information would require for us to make that decision of where we want to go with it. And in doing so, we had various consultees, processing and so forth, and the report tells you effectively its findings. And what was then brought to me was in a look at the annual conversation, we would then be able to, and Cornwall Unitary were our exemplar here, we would then look at having that. And of course, that would give a much greater, wider approach than just contacting senior schools. The Queen's Croft were part of the process, but it would then include going forward that we could bring in the scout movement, the guide movements, and everything else that around youth, and give us a bit of a rather greater inclusivity than we probably had already addressed that was struggling. Some schools weren't prepared to participate. You can't make them, it's not on that curriculum. So it's very much reliant on the goodwill and wanting to do it. And I think just genuinely we've tried it, and it fizzled out, I'm afraid. Will, do you want to be able to expand on any of that?
No, I think that pretty much covers a lot of the information up until this point. As the cabinet member says, part of the issue towards the latter half of 2024 was that engagement really dropped off. We did try a soft relaunch in September of 2024, where we contacted all the schools in the district, not just those that had taken part previously, but anyone that might be interested in participating. But the response we got to that was very minimal, unfortunately. So at that point, that's when we made the decision to say, let's put this on hold temporarily and let's form a working group to see if this is the best method of youth engagement in the district, or if there are potentially better methods out there. And during that consultation, that's when we identified a number of options, and the one that was expressed as the third option was that of the annual conversation, which is something that Cornwall Council currently do to really great effect. In our meetings with them, they were glowing about some of the responses they've had as part of their annual conversations, and their annual conversations have actually led them to identify the young participants that were really involved and really wanted to have that contribution, and they actually took them away and said, you know, would you like to form a steering committee, panels, to actually shape further youth consultation in the district? And they've gone and done that, and they have really highly recommended that as a potential method of boosting youth engagement in any authority.
Just a few things before bringing other members. One is that I did read out earlier on that other authorities, that this was in the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee previously, that other authorities be looked to for best practice ideas to help. So from the beginning of the Youth Council, were other practices looked at when things looked like they were failing? Is the question with the Cabinet member, obviously, because what I've asked for and that you can't supply me with is the attendance record of all the meetings. So there's a question about didn't sign in and that sort of thing. But we don't know when the attendance dropped off.
Well, again, on that, we can say, there we are. So attendances, how many youth councillors? So in February 24, 14 attendances.
Yeah, we got up to 22, you see, so I just wanted, you know, further back, when did it start dropping off?
Up to then we were getting good as full attendance.
You've got a record of that.
Yes, there will be a record somewhere, I'm sure.
So there, for some of the meetings, as we said, part of the issue is you hand a register around at a meeting, register, it gets signed, and then eventually halfway around the room it disappears. It happens at full council, as we've known. But we do have a record, absolutely, for all of the attendances for the meetings in 2024. I would need to double check with regards to late 2023.
When things weren't working yet, my question was about, say, looking at best practice. Was there any research into best practice elsewhere? Because I looked at those things. It wasn't just schools in the way that we've done it.
Yeah, so we did have conversations with some of the councils during the process. That's how we actually first got talking to Cornwall Council. When Youth Council was in operation, we reached out to those other councils to say, you know, how does yours work? What do you do to boost the engagement with young people? And that's where they started to actually talk to us about the idea of an annual conversation, which then when we did this later overall review, something that we thought, oh, I remember that. We'll go and talk to them in more detail about what that is like and how it works.
But am I right in saying they have quarterly meetings as well as the annual conversation?
They do.
They constituencies. They have youth council members are elected by the constituencies.
They do. That crucially stemmed from their annual conversation. Their annual conversation came first, and their intention was to just do this as a one-off yearly event. But they actually found, as I said earlier, that there were some young people that were really engaged and actually wanted that further interaction, involvement, and that's where their youth council actually evolved from.
I think through you, Chair, that it's the chance for people to come see what we do, how we do it, and then to see if they want to become involved. And it's also a way for us to sort of identify perhaps those youth leaders and grow something rather than setting up a structure and filling it, actually organically grow it and involve young people in how that grows, how they wish to engage with the council rather than create a structure for them. And that's, I think, the model that Cornwall followed by. They started with a very small number, actually, of young people who were identified through that conversation, and they grew it from there.
I don't think how I can put this, but what's your interest in this? I mean, you're younger than me. You're a young fellow compared to me. But what's your role in this? Mark? It's I can't think how to word it. You know,
it's because it's
in here.
Because it started off as from a governance perspective.
I was thinking that. But
And perhaps that was one of the things that we maybe look to change, because although we can very good at the governance side, maybe the skill set that we need to involve is slightly different with outreach workers and people like that have got that communication. So that's why I've been happy to leave it to Will and Fiona in terms of being closer to that demographic.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just
A lot of-
add in terms of other authorities? I mean, we did there was 11 authorities we approached. Most of them were county, London boroughs, with a couple of district and boroughs. But the Cornwall unitary was the one that stood out as where we could take this forward.
Which is late on myself, but Sue, then Tom, and Miles. Did I do that way? So please. We had a ages ago now.
Thank you. I wasn't a member of the council when the youth council was set up, but I know that there were some issues and concerns about how it was going to work. Just listening to what the cabinet member and others have said, it seems to me that you're looking at things from the wrong end of the telescope. We talked about the enthusiasm fizzled out, you know, the attempt to relaunch didn't work. We're looking at it from the perspective of schools, because the September relaunch is just after the new school year started. And I'm sure, you know, teachers and staff and students themselves have got a lot more to do than think about coming to a youth council meeting, which was not particularly inviting. Me about the involvement, I don't want to one meeting with youth council, was it seemed completely dislocated from the council, completely, to the point that I as a member wasn't allowed to see minutes, for example, till I sort of on the table. So you know, I think you attended, Councillor Cox. You were the only councillor attending, and you said to me that you weren't sort of part of that discussion. Well, what was the lovely thing about the one I attended was that sort of active discussion that was going on. So it to me just smacked of tokenism. It was right, we need to speak to young people. Let's set this up. We won't put any effort into it. You know, paragraphs 3.1, 3.8 say, you know, well, there was this problem and that problem and the other problem. Who's to blame for that? You know, the first meeting of the youth council was 2.5 years ago. The last scheduled meeting on the list we're given was over a year ago. How important is youth engagement to you as a cabinet member, to the leadership of the council, that you've let it fizzle out over 2.5 years and you've not had a meeting of a youth council for over a year in the changing context that we've got in local government now? So, you know, why, you know, who's to blame for the failures? Why weren't they picked up sooner? And what have you done about youth engagement in the meantime? Because if it's important, it's important. It doesn't appear to be to this council anymore.
It is important that we have a youth engagement. If I can just, in terms of the governance behind council, this was not a government. This is not a council subcommittee. This was a standalone youth council that had its own constitution. So it wasn't part of the council, although we were the facilitator to it, but it wasn't to be set up in that way. And it is disappointing that it fizzled out. To go forward, I wanted to make sure that we came up with an alternative situation, and that has taken time. And it probably referred to what you've actually said, Councillor Woodward, is perhaps that should have been done in the first instance, instead of us going the way we did. Now I'll put my hands up and to say that we probably hadn't thought it out thoroughly, but we tried what we did and recognised there were errors within our thing and put our hands up there. But the time delay is because we've wanted to be sure that an alternative to make sure that we've got that youth engagement and expand on the youth engagement, because I still believe that that is the case, that it should be, is done, that we could successfully launch it and see how we go with that. And that is where we've obviously spent time really working out behind it. And that's why we've come up with the annual conference as a recommendation to take it forward, not necessarily dwell on the past, but certainly take it forward.
I'm grateful to have confirmation that the Youth Council was completely dislocated from the council, which seems to be a complete error, because there's no point in these young people giving their opinions if nobody's listening. So, no wonder the enthusiasm waned when, they'd be thinking, what's the point of going to these meetings? Nobody listens to us anyway. But yeah, thank you for the acknowledgement that these things should have been looked at much sooner. Thanks, Chair.
I just want to spend some time in the background, because learning from what went wrong is always helpful, so it's not repeated. And then we will go on to the future and what is being proposed. But so I'm happy to take all the comments about it. Tom, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Listening with interest, because this is sort of new to me, I suppose, having been just introduced to this committee. There is an already existing group out there, which I think fits this bill incredibly well. And I think it's quite significant that Cornwall was the county which proved so helpful. Cornwall is a very rural county. It has two industries, tourism and farming, and it's the latter which I'm going to just mention now. There's an organisation throughout the country, the National Farm, sorry, the Young Farmers. It's the Confederation of Young Farmers, etc., etc. I think nearly every county in England and Wales, probably Scotland as well, has got a Young Farmers group. Staffordshire has got 9 group members representing different rural communities. And having been a product of it myself some 40 odd years ago, I know that there is a structure there which encourages debate, which creates committee structures and everything. So a lot of these young people from the age of 16 are already very conversant with how committees work, and they have brains trust competitions, etc., etc. So I mean, young farmers don't spend all their time worming cattle and shearing sheep. They do have very interesting social lives as well. And I think we should be reaching out to the Young Farmers Organisation, which is based at the Stafford Showground. If you need contact details, Mark, I have all of those as well. I think you would find quite a willing cohort there. They're already used to structures, as I say, like committees, and I think they would be very valuable. There's quite a useful resource there of young people. They normally stay in the organisation up until the age of 26. So you've got 10 years, if you like, of working within the Young Farmers structure for some of those people. And believe me, there is a real wealth of talent there, and also an enthusiasm to engage in a community way. So I think that would be a very worthwhile way of reaching out. Thank you.
I think that's what the future will be we're looking at. I think you want to.
I just wanted to come in and say, Tom's absolutely right, and they've reinvigorated the Lichfield branch that had also over a number of years wasn't active too well, and we've got the Ridways branch, which was again wound down and everything. And I have been talking to their president, Chris Broom, who is a farmer in
Crossing Hand
Lane. Thank you, Tom. And I've been in conversation with him already on a number of issues, and we've exchanged a lot of positive information. So that is something for sure, and that is where the youth, the annual conversation can bring in, as I said.
Oh, no, we'll move on to that shortly. Okay, that's all right. Off that, I've got Anne next there, and then a few other speakers.
Thank you very much. Conversation has taken a rather surreal turn, I feel, although I do have young farmers on the list of what I was going to say, which is even more surreal. I thought this was very disappointing. I'm always complaining that this is a council that has unreasonable ambitions and needs visions, but this seems to be entirely without a vision. It was a very bizarre way to start simply with a council that was based only on school. And then, I mean, Councillor Woodward, as it's, quoted it, the fact that it fizzled out, enthusiasm dropped off, sort of nothing to do with us, just somehow it faded away. I think it's very surprising for this council that usually does have a vision and that they've tried something and then the best they can come up with is an annual conversation. Like everybody else, I've done an internet search through councils that work, and most of them are not based on schools. They are based on a much more wide-ranging trawl, often self-nominated young people, from the young farmers, from schools, from sports clubs, from scouts and guides, from dance and arts, arts things, from political parties even. I mean, most of us can get one or two young people who are interested in politics. And places like Dudley, York seem to have both useful annual meetings and regular meetings. There's one I looked at that met fortnightly, we were thinking, because people were committed to it, usually directly nominated, but then elected and chosen steering committees and so on, and linked often with national youth parliaments. So it's not just about sort of seeing what the district council or whatever succeeds us does, but people who are interested, as your consultation showed, interested in their communities, interested in the environment, in mental health, in employment and economic development. So it seems to me that we shouldn't just go from, we tried one very old-fashioned, unambitious structure, and then, now we're going to have some rather amorphous annual meeting. We'll only have time for one or two, and then possibly setting up, we could use the consultation with Hill Ridware Young Farmers and whichever Ridware was what Piper and anybody else, an open invitation to young people to see what they want and how they want to engage with the local council structures. So I thought it was very unreflective and very unambitious.
Respond later when we go through it, or?
Well, no, I think we've already acknowledged that we didn't get it right to begin with, and it's going forward that matters. And actually, I think what matters is taking this committee's views on it from today. And in fact, I would probably think that we could go further and whether we could encourage, perhaps regarding I think the officers have done well. If there is more to be done, then we're going to have to look at it and see where we can go with it. It was something that we wanted to do, but we've, I'm not going to reflect on too much of the past. We know where we've gone wrong, and there's got to be ways of doing it better. And if you don't think then the annual conference is the way forward, then maybe we've got to now start looking at other ways of doing it. But it wasn't for officer time and everything else, looking and researching how we could do things. And I thank them for doing so. To bring forward a paper, yes, I'd have liked it done sooner. There was a couple of things that I held back on because I didn't think it was necessarily right. So of course it went back to the officer to actually do a bit more further on research. Because I wanted to get it right. I realised that we got it wrong. We may have to get it right.
Well, we're moving on more on soon, but we've got Councillor Sprague next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm a bit confused, and forgive me if I don't know the full background of this. Background here doesn't say what age youngsters this is aimed at. I'm guessing 14 to 18, but
11 to 18.
11 to 18, so even wider. And it doesn't say particularly what the purpose of it is. Is it for the council to get the views of young people, or is it to empower young people to understand how councils, democracy works? I would think that you could actually try and do both, but it isn't really clear what that's from. Now, I had many years in my working life working with 14 to 18-year-olds. And I actually think that the annual conversation, or I would suggest it needs to be perhaps several, one in Burntwood, one in Lichfield, and and others around, so that you can get more young people and get the range of views. If you're just looking for, I mean, it doesn't need to be based on schools, but this is based on schools, and you've got 6 people elected or selected from that school, you're not going to get the full range of views of those youngsters. It will be a certain type of youngster who will be going forward. So I'm very much in favour of these conversations and having them, more locally, so you can involve more youngsters. And from that, you could perhaps get some enthusiasm for a youth council meeting. But what's important is, and I've done lots of work in schools on things like this. You've got to set it up so they feel they can achieve something. If they just turn up every time and talk, then they're not going to bother. If it's set up so that they can achieve something and be empowered, then that gives them lots of confidence in themselves, and it gives them the wanting to come back and to keep going with this. So I think there's actually a bit more thought needs to go in as to why we're doing it and how we're going to get young people to stay. I mean, obviously the young farmers have people. The local training providers will have a forum. Their youngsters will be based in different employers, but they will be in contact with them all. They should be involved because they should be sending people. The college, there's lots of young people out there, and actually it needs to kind of bring them together. Not this school and this school. There should be young people from the district.
Councillor Bragg, I don't disagree. I think if we go back to the beginning again, it was this was an area where never done before, and and I'll repeat, so errors are being made, but let's not reflect on those. Let's use obviously where we know that we went wrong, but let's go forward and get this absolutely right. And obviously your views from the committee can be taken on board, and that's important. So we can take all this away, based around the and if this committee doesn't want an annual conversation, then we've got to take that away and look to see how we can encompass all of those groups, which you didn't before. It was something that we hadn't involving the schools that we did. We hoped that we would get, and it wasn't about our own, it was for them to set an agenda of what they wanted. So they rightfully picked out certain things on environment and health, and they were very useful debates. And in fact, one of the debates on health went back to the county council because I raised it there, and it got that airing where it could then be taken up and taken further, and it was actually around vapes. What started off as an environmental issue quickly turned into a health issue. So those conversations were happening. In terms of certain cabinet members did come and sit there. There was a presentation from Councillor Strachan with regards to his portfolio of when we were consulting.
Did he make it sound exciting?
Sorry?
Did he make it sound exciting?
I did see.
And actually, a lot of those, that meeting that's very pertinent.
Well, can you do the same for us next time then?
Now,
We'll cover some good questions. It makes it starting for.
so I'm not disagreeing with what you're proposing. I think we have to take this on board and use what the scrutiny can suggest to us, as well as, and you know, maybe going back to the beginning, we should have had a task group in reflection from ONS that could have built it up. Now,
The recommendations, isn't there? Which I
that
don't
didn't
think
happen, but let's go forward and then let make it happen.
Well, we can learn from what might have gone wrong or wasn't right. Then we could certainly make progress. So that's why I'm allowing people to speak. I should mention that with vapes, that's on most of the youth council manifestos. Vapes is the thing that's I've seen throughout the different ones I've looked at. I got Paul and then Miles and then Colin.
Miles
What?
Miles was before me, to be fair.
Well, if you want to do it that way, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm not doing alphabetically.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points I wanted your thoughts on. One is about, so the preferred option put forward now is for an annual conversation, which I can see would have some advantages. A big thing which I fear would be lost if that was the way is an element of education and involvement in local democracy. Part of the initial idea of a youth council is to encourage involvement in local government and understanding of that. If you have an annual conversation which draws in, I can see the advantage of hopefully getting more diversity of thought and getting more different groups involved. But is there a danger that you lose that aspect of education and involvement in local democracy? And at a time when it's more important than ever to get that, we've just had a national announcement about votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. Isn't it more important than ever to try and achieve that aim? Was one of my thoughts. I had a couple of others.
Yeah, no.
Can I just answer that one?
Just say that Will did mention that the quarterly meetings came out of the annual conversations. I mean, so we could do that at the same time, I thought. But
and obviously, what I was going to say there was that in terms of local democracy, it wasn't that wasn't the mantra for the youth council. It was on local issues, issues that would affect them as young people, and they would to voice. So it wasn't a lesson or in terms of local democracy.
No.
Yeah, I can see that, but so there's more than one benefit of a youth council kind of idea, and also it connected with what's been mentioned a couple of times of making it as meaningful as you can, and not just that they comment, but that it has a direct link with what happens locally. That's perhaps easier to follow through if there is a connection with the work of the local council. So I think the two issues are tied together. And on that point, I mean, the importance of it is here in this report. At para 3.8, it says the key messages from the consultation of them is when asked how young people could most benefit from the youth forum, most common answers were making a difference in the community and meeting new people and leadership opportunities. But it's that point about making a difference in the community. Does it not make it more likely if you have that direct link with what this council is doing? And the only other point, so to pick up on the chair's point about the meetings in between, as this conversation's developed tonight, I was thinking, well, actually the proposal is just for an annual conversation, but do you actually envisage that there would be meetings in between? Because when I was reading the report, I was thinking, well, is it a straight choice between a monthly rigid youth council meeting or an annual forum? Is there not something in between, a quarterly meeting, which maybe young people find less onerous and are less likely to fizzle out of if it is a sort of lower commitment?
I think Will had presented that view right at the beginning, in the sense looking at the Cornwall annual conversation, that from the conversation, splinter meeting groups were created that was then on Pacific issues that have been taken forward. So from the annual conference, you then have effectively working groups that create going forward to deal with those issues. So that was what we would be looking at. So of course there would be further meetings. It wouldn't just, we listen to you today and we'll see you next year. It would be very much that we would take those forward. The annual conference is the way that it's being brought to bring all of the groups that everything's been said that we didn't do, bring them to the arena and start again. And yeah, things could have been done should have been done like that at the beginning, maybe, but it didn't. So on reflection, this is where we've come. And yes, it's taken time, but we think this is the best solution, unless it's decided that we don't proceed with it full stop. And I personally think that would be the wrong decision. And I would like to investigate and on the basis of what we presented tonight, is take that forward and get it right. And if it means that we have a task group that's included, then let's do it. You know, let's get scrutiny involved.
I mean, the Cornwall in the paragraph of the report about the Cornwall, it's not clear that there are quarterly meetings that they came out of there. Will did say that right at the beginning. And although there's a link to the annual conversation, I came across the quarterly meetings a different way. Will, defend yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say, just through you, Chair, I think the way to think of it is, yes, we want to have this annual conversation, but the annual conversation, as well as being an engagement event, is also an open call to young people to say, are you interested in issues and getting involved with politics of the district? And through that annual conversation, feedback we've had from other authorities that have run this is that's the opportunity where you identify the people that really are interested and want to get involved. And the hope is that absolutely we will find the same, and we will find that there are people that attend that really want to have that engagement, and we can then put together them as a group or as a panel or whatever form it takes to then have those more regular meetings, because that was another key message that we drew out. If you want to have regular meetings, start small, start engaged. Don't go big where there's the risk of lots of people then losing interest, and then that almost creates its momentum. You want to have a small group that are thoroughly and highly engaged and grow from there almost. And the hope is that this is the way of identifying that small group in the first place.
If you're okay, Marv, I'll move on to Paul.
Yeah,
Sorry, you've got another one, Miles.
Well, I have one more sort of supplementary on what you've just said. So for the annual conversation, one of the benefits presumably is to be able to reach out to the individual young people. If you can market it, if you can get the comms right on that, you get any impression that previously there was any sort of stumbling block in dealing with the leadership of schools? Was the message filtered through to young people? Were busy sort of leaderships of schools not passing it on?
I'm aware of instances where the schools weren't necessarily passing the information on to the representatives. That's an information that was relayed to me directly from the representatives, that there were meetings taking place that they hadn't necessarily been notified about. I can only, as I say, take their word for it, and also make an assessment based on the subsequent soft relaunch we did and any responses we got from that. Yeah.
The potential advantage of dealing directly to get that message straight to the people.
And for me, picking on obviously from the announcement we've had about voting age of 16, I think there is an opportunity now that by announcing an annual conversation, would hope that people would recognise that, well, are we really need to be involved in politics and democracy until we're like 18 plus or whatever? The aim is obviously clearly to be 16. So therefore, there's an opportunity for us to get on top of that agenda, because they have taken it forward. And then because, you know, unless there's a drive and availability on that, what does voting age of 16 actually mean?
Mark.
I was just going to pick up on Councillor Trent's point that as an observer to this, I do think we missed that direct connection, which we will seek to establish through the conversation. That will make it, that will just increase the line of communication no end. And also, I mean, picking up on what Councillor Hughes was saying, and what Will has said, that it's very much we see as a starting point. So I hope you're not too disappointed, because it is part of a larger ambition going forward. But we need this is very much the start of that journey, I think. And also, yeah, don't want to be too prescriptive at this stage also, because we want to see what comes out of that. But I mean, our aim would be introduction to democracy, very, very much so, and also to engage with a demographic that's really quite hard to reach at times. So I would imagine, like, policy team, for example, would want an involvement in that going forwards.
Excellent, thank you very much. I've got Colin then, and again, please.
Yeah,
What did I say? Well, it's your own fault, because I've had to change Miles to Paul, and I've all gone confused. Oh, then Colin, and then Anne, and then Steve.
Yeah, okay. I was just going to say, I'm not for support a number of the comments I've made, convinced about the annual conversation, and I don't think so much it's the forum, it's actually the way it worked. And the points being made is that the attendees, the young people involved, need to know they're making an impact and they're making a difference, and it's tangible and it's worth their while. And a couple of the examples I've made in the past is for the ability for the youth council to bring a motion to full council, the ability for the youth councillors to have access to the councillors so they can try and persuade them and inform them of what's happening in the district. And I know, Richard, just to sort of challenge you, when the youth council was on, myself and I know other councillors contacted you, we'd like to have contact with these councillors. I was particularly eager for that because of Andrew Rushton, who's a young man in his 20s. That would have been a good bit of connection for the youth council, but you sort of warned us off doing that. But I think the youth council have to have contact with the council, so it does say there is that tangible benefit. And I'll just finish, because you made the point about it was waning because they didn't feel they were making a difference, which is just making the point. If they can make if there's something tangible, there's some tangible outcomes where they can tangibly make a difference through the council processes, that itself will drive interest. So I think it should be reconsidered, and I think there's a couple of key points I'm picking up. One is it isn't just schools, it's youth more generally, and the point I've made and Councillor Bragger made about it being tangible. So the young people do feel it's not just a forum where they just talk, they can actually make a tangible difference to what happens in this district.
Yeah, I mean, I was very uncomfortable with councillors' interaction with the youth council, because it wasn't necessarily, as I said earlier in the conversation, that it wasn't about politics. This was about issues. And
It's about politics, isn't it?
yeah, no, we can have different interpretations, and if that might have been
About
wrong,
politics, there's no interpretation about it. It's politics with a small thing.
I think, Richard,
I think what I was trying to aim for was I only ever turned up as an observer and hardly said a word, and I just observed the
I
process.
think, Richard, I sensed you didn't trust me and maybe other councillors. You thought I was going to get in front of them and go really political.
Hang on,
But just be finished my point. Unless they do have access to the people who have the votes in this council, then if they do have access to these people, it makes a real difference.
So picking up on your bringing a motion to full council,
Yeah.
you would have to change full constitution to allow that and make it a complete constitutionalised committee, because that's the only way that is going to work. So
Maybe, or at least if the access to councillors, so the councillors could then bring the motion to full council.
Thank you. Colin was next, and then Anna. Appreciate what you.
Chair, I remember when we first discussed this 3 years ago, we raised a lot of these concerns that have been raised now about it being a select group of schools, not extending it to homeschool children, and all that needed to have a much wider range of young people involved. And I hope that the cabinet member is listening this time and will make changes of the type we're suggesting. I think Will and Mark have given a very good account of themselves here in terms of what the ambition is from this annual event, whatever you call it, comes something else. That's not in the report. That needs to be made much clearer. It needs to be an ambition. I've written 2 things on the report. what's the extent of the involvement and what are the outcomes expected? That there needs to be a very wide range of involvement in this of young people across the district, not just schools, but also all the other places we talked about earlier. But also there needs to be outcomes. There need to be reasons why these people come along to these events. We also asked initially, when this was first raised, to get report back from the youth councils. I don't remember having those, but maybe they came and I was, I wasn't at that particular meeting. I'm not sure, but I think there needs to be much more engagement, and that particularly in the light of the voting age being likely to be reduced in a few years' time, young people need to feel that they can have a real influence. And there are always mechanisms of taking motions to council. You don't need to change the constitution to do that. The youth council can ask a specific councillor to raise a motion on their behalf at council, and we need to be open to those opportunities and not try and brush them aside and make them difficult to happen. So I do hope the cabinet member will listen this time and take action on the suggestion.
Can I just check?
Well,
There's been,
because we're
Chairman,
trying to move on.
oh, no, I'm not allowed to reply, am I?
Yes, you are replied to, but when I say you're allowed to reply, which ain't yet.
I just wanted to say that there's a danger. I mean, there's some very positive things being said. There's a danger that the first annual conversation will be something provided for young people in a top-down way by whoever. And I seem to be the most effective youth councils did have a mixture of, regular meetings and annual events. And I just think it'd be very important, perhaps if it's possible, you've had some connections with people in the sort of whatever the consultation was, but that if you're going to hold it in October, it needs to get going very quickly, but that it would be very important that young people somehow were involved in the organisation and planning, so that it's not just a top-down event, and that the intention to have something more regular coming out of it is absolutely, that it's not just a one-off, but it certainly shouldn't be schools.
If I can sort of sum up then, if that's okay, which is that it's more than schools. It's measuring outcomes. That's to say that young people that make a decision, they want to see outcomes. That's what most people do in voting. They want to see outcomes on the manifesto promises of the politicians that they've had before. And that we like the annual conversation, but it's got to be other meetings as well, regular meetings as well of some sort, where you have the link between the council and the youth members of the youth council and so on. Please, if you can come in.
Chair, can I just add that Councillor Bragger suggested there might be 2 or 3 annual conversations, geographically located across the district, and I thought that was really useful in view of, transport getting to and from meetings.
I can say there's 2 reasons. One, because of the transport, and the other because each one could involve more young people. The Burton and Litchfield.
Mark, did you want?
I would say that absolutely, and that's part of what can be put on that day. I think. How do people see that going forward? How do they, would those regional meetings help or whatever? But very much a question. Maybe part of that day will be a session where they look at how they would like to develop it.
With Cornwall, it also includes the Scilly Isles as well. So it's so I'm going to mention Guernsey now. Jersey gets mentioned in the report. I don't know why. Not interested in Jersey, 1 iota. But in Guernsey, the Youth Forum in Guernsey for Guernsey and Alderney brings together young people from across the bailiwick to represent the voice of their peers and ensure the voice of young people is heard within the decision-making process, both in the bailiwick and further abroad. And who makes up the Youth Forum? It's 38 spaces for 38 members. These are young people between the age of 11 and 25. Usually they will go through an election process to represent their schools and groups on the forum. And there's a manifesto. I see a number of youth councils have manifestos. In the case of Guernsey, the Youth Forum are elected of young people, as I said, that we have over 10,000 under 18s, and it's likely our future President of Policy and Resources in Guernsey government is in our education system now. So it's essential we raise well-informed voters for a more representative states today and a well-informed one tomorrow. And of course, you can vote at 16 in Guernsey. I've done for some time. and Jersey. Studies by the University of Edinburgh show that in Scotland, where the voting age was lowered to 16, those 16 and 17-year-olds who voted for the first time show a higher engagement in future elections. And so it's essential that we do everything we can to get as many of our youth involved now, so we have politically eloquent adults later. There's QR codes and that sort of thing. So, Cabinet member, do you want to say anything more? I think we've all got a sort of agreement, as far as I can see, including from yourself, that how to make it better is an annual, more than one annual meeting, or the regular meetings to shed the connection between what the council does and what young people want at the youth council. Anything else you want to?
No,
Was there anything making you delay your answer? I wasn't stopping you. No, put you in now. Go on then.
Can I just add the point that I think a number of us have made, that there's got to be more thought about how the youth council connects with councillors and other elected representatives. And you know, Paul's experience absolutely reflects mine. I felt that there was a nervousness about councillors getting involved with these young people. There was a nervousness about what the young people might say to us councillors, and a nervousness about councillors trying to dominate the conversation. The one youth council that I went to was great because people were really enthusiastic, and it was about a decision that they brought forward to give some of the money that they'd been given to allocate it to a particular youth programme. What happened? They voted for that, and then the nervousness afterwards meant that that decision was squashed. So not only did they make a decision with enthusiasm and so on, it was taken away and the decision was negated. And that is the very worst thing that can you know, there was the sort of dead hand of the establishment, if you like, saying, well, you know, we want you to talk to us, but we don't like the decisions we're going to overturn them. So there's got to be some thinking about how the council and the youth council, in whatever form, interact.
Chair, I'd like to just come back on that. The decision that Councillor Woodward is referring to is a grant for the fun club. It wasn't squashed, it was given. It was £5,000. What was done was to ensure that the governance based on that decision meant that because of the finances of what was budgeted for was the process of getting it done, and it wasn't squashed. They were awarded £5,000 on their decision.
Yeah.
Chair, could
Read the reports. Councillor Whaley have.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ray mentioned a few times that, well, about having access to councillors for the youth council. I just wanted to make it clear to anyone watching on
that what we're presented with then is worthwhile and something that's going to work for the council?
I think for me, what I would like to do is that we'll have taken what we've heard tonight. And we can put that forward to you in a briefing paper.
If you could drag it and so
yeah, that's what I meant.
That's what I understood. Yeah, that would be good to speed things on, isn't it? Yeah. That's good. Would delay.
And then you chair can look at that briefing paper and say, yes, our points have been picked up, etc., and take it from there.
Yeah. Sorry, that's very. There's nobody watching, don't worry.
Oh. Is that okay? We'll do it that way. I promise you that we'll. There's a lot of ideas there, and I think there was there wasn't much disagreement in the way forward, leaving this to the past, but we have to look to the past. I don't know if I question Mark's attendance here, but when he first spoke, he had his hands. I couldn't see him speak, so it did throw me a little bit.
It's thrown my voice.
So if that's okay, there's been a lot of comments there. We'll make some progress on that, and I appreciate the work that's gone in that and making you all go around the work looking at youth councils. A lot of them, I say it's interesting to see a lot of them where they do have a lot of resources. Some follow the United Nations versions and all sorts of things. It's quite a variety there. Electoral districts, mostly. Okay. I appreciate that, everybody. Thank you very much. We'll go on to agenda item 7. Might be illegal.
with good support.
This is the outturned performance report, Lichfield District 2050. It's a delivery plan. This can be the leaders. Report, well. Oh, please, would like to introduce it, leader. Thank you.
Thank you. You made me nervous now after watching that. We've got the Lichfield District 2050 strategy, which I know that some members think is looking too far into the future. And I think, yeah, that was an issue that had been expressed at numerous times throughout the process of creating Lichfield District 2050. I think partly to allay those fears, but also to keep ourselves accountable on delivering that vision, we created annual delivery plans, then subdivided into quarters to ensure that we really were making progress towards that vision, and we're actually setting firm delivery plans on an annual basis to make sure that actually we were actually getting closer to that vision throughout that time period. So this is the outside report from the 24-25 delivery plan and associated KPIs. As you'll see from the paper, we hit a lot of the goals, a lot of the delivery plan. We didn't hit all of it. There were some brilliant successes, there were some near misses, and there were some absolute misses. I think it'd be fair to say that, I think, as Simon would say, a number of the targets, particularly in the KPIs, were stretch targets that were far and away exceeded previous attainment by this organisation. So whilst clearly we always want to meet our KPIs, some of the time, in fact, we haven't met our KPI, but we've done better than we did last year. So whether we see that as a positive or not, I'll leave that to the committee to determine. As Lucy just said to me a few minutes ago, we've done a bit of prep work to answer some questions, but we all know how these reports go sometimes, and we may very find ourselves down a rabbit warren that we weren't expecting. So more than happy to answer any questions on any aspect of the report. But also just to flag, actually, the part of this, I think back to that accountability word, it really is saying that this is where we want to go. These are the things that we're hoping to achieve, and then coming back at a regular cadence to ensure that we're holding ourselves accountable, and both politicians, to make sure that we are delivering against that plan.
I think probably now is the best time to, if you want to mention the local government, give us an update on local government reorganisation. Simply because the effect was.
Sure. I said sure.
Oh, right. Let me sentence. Because this question was 2050 will be here. So yeah, well then.
Well, some of us might be here in 2050, Councillor Norman.
No, the council one about.
Okay.
Inside or outside the organisation.
Yeah. So, as we know, government is
Very good.
is instructing local authorities up and down the country to reorganise. Some of us think that's a brilliant idea. Some of us think it's a terrible idea. Some of us think it probably is a good idea in principle, but is being executed very poorly. Nevertheless, whatever our views on it, we must do it. We've got to get engaged, and we've got to come up with a way of reorganising local government within the parameters that have been set out by Jim McMahon as Minister for this area. The current proposal that is being put forward by, that I'm supporting from Lichfield District Council, is that within the Staffordshire area, Stoke, Staffordshire Moorlands and Newcastle under Lyne, I think it's a given that those three organisations will blend and create a Northern Staffordshire unitary. There is a proposal that the remaining 6 councils in the southern half of Staffordshire, so that's South Staffs, Cannock, Stafford, Lichfield, Tamworth and East Staffs, form a unitary at the southern side of Staffordshire
that would be around 650,000 residents across around just over 2,000 square kilometres. The competing proposal, which I'm very much in favour of, is splitting that into 2 lots of 3 in the southern half of Staffordshire. So that would be us, Tamworth and A Staffs, and then Cannock, Stafford and South Staffs. Both of those options have been demonstrated by KPMG, who are doing some work with us, that they would be financially viable. The 2 lots of 3 is slightly more expensive to get set up and has a slightly longer payback period, and represents a slightly greater cost per elector over a period of time. However, the margins of error, clearly the level of certainty at which those projections are being based at the moment, it could very easily swing either way, and that's been confirmed by KPMG. So the question for me really is, how close do we want to be to our communities? The future unitaries will be responsible for delivering services. The new strategic authority, which will probably be made up of northern Staffordshire and southern Staffordshire in whatever capacity or entity they form, they'll be responsible for doing the big economic delivery and strategic projects, transport, and the sort of the strategic investment. So those unitaries are really going to have to focus on how do we very best serve our residents. For me, the answer is really simple, that if we have smaller councils, we can deliver better for our residents, while still maintaining those efficiencies that national government is seeking for us to make. We are, I think it'd be fair to say that we are slightly behind the curve. So I know some councils up and down the country have absolutely got they know what they're doing. There's agreement across the county that they're in. They're now working out what the ward names are going to be of future unitaries and how many electors are going to be there. We absolutely aren't at that point yet. There is some disagreement amongst the 6 councils in the southern half of Staffordshire as to how we should best proceed. And I think it's important to say at this point that none of this, my perspective, should be based on politics or political party or whatever boundaries we think might best serve political parties in the future. They've got to be grounded in what works best for our residents, and I think that all parties from across Staffordshire are endeavouring on that basis. So we've got to submit by November. November's going to come around really quickly, so we need to pull our fingers out.
I appreciate the update on all that. I think that's the KPMG reports. We're ready now. Is that something that we can see as scrutiny members shared amongst all the? I don't know.
I think it's a work in progress. So we had a.
You were giving what you think is going to be the result, weren't you? I think.
Yeah, it wasn't quite like that, but yeah.
I'm saying you're confident. That's what. Yeah. Are you confident? Yeah. Executive, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so at the moment, KPMG is essentially developing 2 models for their proposals. The idea has always been that at some point we would agree amongst the 6 what is the preferred model. As Doug the leader has suggested, there are some issues with achieving that. But en route to a submission to government in November this year, obviously each of the individual councils will go back through their normal governance process as well. So you will have the opportunity to see those final.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the speech you have ready. If you win the election or if you lose.
And I think to follow up on what Mr. Fletcher has just said there, there is no, and for understandable reasons, the minister said, look, this is not going to be a referendum. This is not going to be, it's not going to be a sort of a majority vote of councils or anything like that. Ultimately, it will be a ministerial decision. Totally get that. But what I do want to make sure is that we have the opportunity in an appropriate forum to really debate this and do that in the right forum and make sure that everyone has access to the same information, that we're able to come to a decision together as a council. So that will certainly be coming to full council for an open debate based on all the information that we've been given as far.
It's on our work programme as well for November. So for all the deadline. Yeah. I'm going to check. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, so if we go through the report then, if that's okay, got the recommendations.
Can I just ask a question on that?
Yes, yeah, I beg your pardon, yeah, sorry.
You know, and we've spoken, I point I made to Councillor Woodward yesterday when we spoke, which was, in principle, I support the 2x3.
Yeah.
I guess it's a question back to you really, and then to you, Simon. When it goes to government, we need to know it's going to be accepted, as opposed to having a model imposed on us. And I just don't know, do we, I know the minister has said a population of 3 below 500 is, it's not a threshold, it can, there's a flexibility around that. But I'm just interested in hearing both your views really on how can we get some comfort from government that what we're going to put forward is going to be acceptable, as opposed to it just gets thrown off the desk by the minister and we then get a model imposed on us, which, yeah, we need to get some sort of, you know, how do we get that feel? How do we get that comfort that what we're putting forward is going to be acceptable?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, a really good point. The short answer is we can't. The slightly more long-winded answer would be that when the white paper was published, 500,000 figure was an absolute, this is the number that it needs to be at. Since then, that language has been softened to the point where it is very explicitly been called out now in further ministerial statements that actually 500,000 will probably be an average over the country, and that as long as a sensible justification is made about why that number has been selected, and as long as it's justified, they the government are happy to go with that, as long as there's a sound justification. And that's whether you exceed the number, whether you hit the number. So even if you're at 500, you still need to justify why you're at 500, and the same if you're at, say, 350. So I think for me, it's about making sure that we've got a really solid business case for whatever solution we come up with, to make sure that we can stand behind that when we send it off to government. And I think that's as much as we can possibly do. I don't know if there's anything you want to say. That's good.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the only thing I'd add to that is the only way that we would ever be certain as we were submitting the proposal that it was going to get the nod would be if there was so across the county of Staffordshire there was overall consensus, and we were only submitting one bid. To be fair though, even then I think Surrey there was consensus, and MHCLG came back and said, well, you haven't thought about this option, include that option. I think in our county there could easily be 5 or 6 proposals submitted at the end of the day, because there is a lack of consensus, in which case it comes down to the quality of the proposal and the business case.
And I think for me on that, just continue on that, the number one important thing there is that whatever proposals are being submitted are all based off the same data set. That's really critical. So if every proposal was working on a different set of data, that just throws the government into around that. As long as we can say, look, we're actually all working off the same data here, but we've got different perspectives on things, I think that helps in a way. It takes us through that first hurdle. I think secondly, through the KPMG work, we can see that actually virtually all models, actually pass the financial viability threshold. Now, some might say, well, some are more financially viable than others, but actually, if they were just trying to scale up and say, well, they're more financially viable because they're bigger, then we might as well just make a council for the whole of England and say this is the best possible financial viable council for the whole of the country. So what we actually then start looking at is the qualitative type data and say, well, actually, if they're all going to meet the financial viability test and they pass that threshold, then we move on to not the touchy-feely things, but actually the very essence of local democracy, really, which is, well, how many people do you want each councillor to be representing? How close to your communities do you want to be? How effective do you want to be able to be to advocate on behalf of your residents? And I think that our business case will very much focus on that element of things rather than the pure numbers, although clearly the numbers are very important.
I remember David Blunkett saying when you come to the revenue support grant settlement, you've got the Association of District Councils, you've got the county councils, you've got the Mets, all arguing for different things. And when it became the LGA, you've got a consensus in the sense that you've got this one voice, and that's the problem if you haven't got some sort of agreement, if not a consensus completely, which is that, well, you know, it just gets a bit messy, and you don't know where you're going to end up, and you may not end up with something a team nobody actually wanted. Not that you're going to paint in boys from the black stuff, I think it is. Oh no, our Vitas MPES, sorry. Ross, you wanted the question?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll be very interested to see the outcome of this work. But can I ask, in the work, is there any consideration done about joint working in the way that we work with Tamworth now? So that while there can be individual councils with individual democracy, that doesn't mean that you on certain issues, and of course there's a lot more delivery than we have as district council when you're taking in a unitary, that some things might be worked like that. I mean, I know it's complicated, but has that been taken into account in the work?
Do you mean into future state, or do you mean?
No, yeah, in the future state. But for instance, if there were 3 unitaries and 2 of them wanted to collectively work on some elderly care issue because it made sense in terms of the viability of it, is that able to be done in the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So as a starting point, KPMG looked at actually existing shared working practices right across the county, but then in terms of future state shared working, that's very much formed part of the business case as well. One of the challenges that every county will face is things like the disaggregation of adult social care and children's services, etc., and splitting that down into 2 or more centres. I think will require cross-unitary working going forward purely because of that basis, because of where we are now and where we're likely to be in the future. So I think it's going to be naturally embedded from day one, and then it's almost flipped on its head, isn't it? It's trying to it starts off as shared working and actually we then need to decide whether they're going to be fully disaggregated or not.
Okay, thanks. We'll go on to the actual report. There was a connection. I'm very grateful for taking the time to answer those questions. And so I'll go through the report. We've got the initial section there. Let's go on to page 34. I can just start this on page 34. There's the green Q2 green going to Q4 amber on 3 things there. The adventure golf and the paddle tennis. What was the delay there? In a briefly on those.
That was just a delay with the contractor, I believe.
Big one.
A delay with the contractor.
Oh, right. Okay. Page 35.
Chair, sorry.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry.
And again, it's on page 34 and 35. It's specifically about empty properties. I mean, we have been, a lot of progress has been made on many issues, but in these kind of programs, we talk about what hasn't been done and why hasn't it been done. So
absolutely,
apologies for that. But that's a major issue. I'll be referring to it again later when we come to look at the work programme. We were promised several times an update on what's happening with empty properties. We've never had that. It's a really important issue. There are hundreds of these properties across the district. They could be housing people. They're currently not. I think we need to be moving this more urgently than we have done. I understand the resource problems within the team. Why can't we recruit more people to do this really important work? I think that's something that really needs to be a major focus, please.
Yeah, and I'd fully agree. It does need to speed up. I think we've made tremendous programme using the high street rental auctions in terms of the commercial properties, and we've seen great progress with a number of units coming back into use. Properties that have been empty for a long time and now are going to have successful independent businesses trading from them. We haven't been quite as quick or quite as successful in terms of the residential. I entirely agree.
Is there another question on 3.313, Colin?
Oh, I mean, it's the same issue. The link again. It's about we've just not been making the progress we should be making. I think it was 2 years ago or 18 months ago, certainly, that we had a big debate here about the empty home strategy and how it was going to be delivered. We made some very good suggestions. I think that were agreed to be taken on board, and we still not cracked it.
For myself on page 35, on the top there's the carefully provoking any members of the committee. Work with the county council to support where appropriate the delivery of the county-wide EV strategy and then the agreed best use of LDC EV capital money. Now, working with the county council, that's going to be problematic, isn't it, now with the change in political control? Hopefully not, but you know, want to.
That's probably why we put where appropriate, to be honest with you, a caveat. But I think you're right that so we've attempted to look at getting EV chargers in for a long time at Lichfield District Council. And the challenge we've always had, well, two main challenges. One is the on-street charging is predominantly driven from the county council network, clearly, which is challenging for us to engage with. And the other part is where we do want to do it on our own car parks. The capacity through existing substations to deliver that power to car parks is proving challenging in that the infrastructure just doesn't exist to get it there. So what we have been looking at is actually how do we partner with the commercial sector to make that come forward more quickly. If there's anything you want to add, Simon?
Only that we're looking at alternatives to joint working with the county council for the reason that you've already intimated that South Staffordshire are leaping ahead with this, and Lucy's team are currently actively looking at those alternatives as well. And we don't expect there to be a delay in trying to deliver this ambition.
Thanks, thank you. On the next page, page 36, the proposal developed and submitted as part of the MTFS there into red Q4. And there's a note on that, but that's top of page 34, 36, I think. Draw attention to it, really.
Yeah.
The 3.14, the 3. Sorry, Colin.
On that point, it's now been removed. I understand the reasons why it's removed because there's not the funding to deliver it.
Are we talking about the same thing? Sorry.
3.14 now we're on.
14, sorry.
It's always bad. The further capital budget currently assigned and has been taken out.
Yeah.
Of the year one delivery plan.
I think having those kind of things around there would not just in Lichfield but also inform people what's on locally. That we don't have any kind of local media. Lichfield Live do a fantastic job. They've now got the newspapers, comes out every fortnight, and that's a great source locally. But having something that's visible, you know, in public spaces across the district, telling people what's going on, how they can find out more information, would be very useful. So I think it's regrettable it's been taken out. Understand there was a funding stream that the UK fund that we couldn't meet those targets. But I think simply taking it out is a disappointment.
Through you, Chair, I think the reality is, it's about making choices and about determining where we best deploy our resources. And personally, I think in terms of particularly around our residual economy network, which this proposal was really trying to address, there are better things we can spend our time and money on.
Yeah. So if you want to.
Yeah, I'm just picking up that point about the fact that that's been removed. I think that is disappointing, especially as a fair amount of work has gone into it. I mean, it's about getting messages out. But because we've got all of these ratings here, the red, amber, green, the leader's absolutely right. All sorts of potential rabbit holes for us to go screen down. I'm sure each one of us could have questions about each one of these. But, you know, I am pleased to see this being presented to us in a transparent and accountable way. The grey ones, though, do cause me some concern. That particular one that's been removed, but then also the baseline setting ones. You know, why haven't we got baselines already set for all of them?
Very good question. I can see Simon's going to answer that for me.
Yeah, I think so. These we're looking at performance that ended at the end of Q4 last year. So we had last year to set that. So when you look at the Q1 performance this year, they should have those baselines in them now. You took last year in order to develop those baselines.
So the assurance is then all of those baseline settings are now in place. Delegate.
Yes.
Yeah.
KPIs, yeah. We're just talking about KPIs.
Go to the landscape then, onto the green amber bits, although amber is a bit pale yellow ochre, but then again, if it had been amber, it's more difficult to put ink on there. But so page 39 is start for May. The demolition of the MSCP and retail units complete, which is good. It's also included in the greener communities, because the environmental achievements on that demolition, I think, are amazing. Yeah. There's a very good story about how it was done and that, so let's mention that. Yeah. Miles, sorry, yes.
Can I ask a question on so 3.16
Okay.
the KPIs? It's a general question about KPIs. It says we have 71 KPIs. I just wondered if you could comment on how manageable you think that is, and how much officer time and resource it takes to track 71 KPIs.
I'll be really honest, and I'll pass on to officers to give you their honest view. I don't think 70 is enough, to be honest with you. We're an organisation of 600 people. Obviously, we everything's going to cascade down, but 70 KPIs across a very large team. It's not like it's one person tracking them, but they're that's spread across a wider leadership team who are accountable for chunks of those. And I'd imagine that those KPIs are then broken down even further in terms of the OKRs that Simon and his team done. So individuals feel some level of accountability towards delivering those KPIs, which in turn support our delivery plan. Lisa will now tell you there's far too many and too difficult to manage.
Do you monitor how much time it takes or how much resource it takes?
Not strictly, no, but as Councillor Pullen has said, we are core officers that are responsible for their team's performance, and we're all about accountability for performance. So we're striving forward with improvements to performance continually. We're just introducing sort of like star chamber approach as well, where every quarter each lead of the team will go to a leadership team meeting and talk about the KPIs, talk about the service plan, talk about how they're driving forward performance. So my team have the overall monitoring responsibility, but the onus is on the individual leads to make sure they're updating their actions and they're on top of everything. And obviously that is embedded then within their team about driving forward performance. So it's not particularly onerous, and it's like one officer mainly in my team. There obviously is chasing that we have to do at the end of each quarter, but everyone knows that their responsibility for providing a quarterly update, and those updates are done. So I think it works well.
It sounds very enjoyable, and we actually paid for this. Executive.
I'm not sure managers enjoy the star chambers, Chair, because they are very challenging.
Good.
That's the entire intent of them as well. But all I would say is I've been in local government a long time. I remember best value indications nationally.
Was everybody would mention that?
Sorry, I know, there were hundreds of the buggers.
Yeah, and then
So we have significantly slimmed down, but performance management and robust performance management is a key part of our model. We're a slim authority. We seek to live within our means, but we still seek to achieve as much as we can. And so having this robust set of indicators, I think, is really important to keep people honest and keep them really clear about what is a priority.
Thanks. I've jumped ahead there, I should have done Miles, but page 37 there. Then if I can go on to the tables, then the landscape ones, I won't repeat much. So I'll just go through the numbers. Page 40. Have we got any issues? 41. On 42, they've engaged with stakeholders to develop Burntwood master plans, and it's gone from warning to red. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, and I think one of my great sources of frustration is that this report always comes to you a few months after it's been collated. So this is obviously brings us to the end of the 24-25 period. That's several months out of date already. We've actually made a bit more progress now with that Burma master plan. So I had a meeting, I know, with Burma councillors last week, and we've made a lot more progress on that since the publishing of this report. So it is now, I'd probably say, amber, but yeah, we've made some progress since the publication of this report.
Thank you. Page 43. Yeah, the one that's moved there, that's it, yeah. Page 40, sorry, on page 44, the one that's removed. Page 45. The active communities small grant scheme and the against the red, sorry, competing demands on the MTFS growth budget. The revised plan is to work with LWMTS on the potential for them to find a new grant scheme. Briefing notes.
Okay, shall I try and?
Yeah, go on, yeah.
So as the update, yes, the pressure on the MTFS made it difficult to allocate funding for this. What the leader of the council has asked LWM to do is with some of the net profit that it generates to look at creating some a similar type of scheme potentially as well. So that's what LWM is currently doing, Chair.
Great, thank you. Page 46. I'm sure you're very pleased with the US girls, us girls, and so on. Getting it and all that stuff. Good stuff there. Page 47. The Greenway. Page 48. 49. 50. I didn't quite get this one, which is on the revenues and benefits, the red there, and it says non-working age claims. I'm not quite clear whether non-working age meant above or below the working age.
It's above, and I believe it relates largely to pension credit claims.
Well, I can help you with that. I used to work for Age UK, don't forget. They were easier, and much easier than doing claims for people with the complications of working. To talk to somebody about that. I have to talk to somebody about that. Page 51 then, again, well, I mentioned the non-working age there again. 52, 53, 54, 55, building control issues there. Could you say a bit more on that one, on the building control? Number of days before plans affected by that. We've lost somebody, I think, somewhere. So,
Go on, yeah.
yeah, but is anybody able to, I mean, be able to explain what the problem is with?
Yeah, Chair, so.
It's all generally by the sound of it, you know.
And it is very much that, Chair, yes, it's counted across the country as well. So there are two, to bore the committee, there are two elements to building control activity. One is the non-fee earning, which is the activity that we as statutory bodies must do, versus the fee earning activity, which the private sector is very interested in and is very competitive in as well. What we're finding is that not only are we really, really struggling to balance the books with this because the fee earning income is so competitive for us, but also lots of the local government staff who would work in local government for a very long time are far more attracted by the salary and opportunities that are being offered by the commercial sector. So we're a building control partnership of 6. We're currently looking at changing the structure and potentially creating a sort of an outsourced company structure so that we can compete with the private sector to get the best staff. These indicators we were woefully poor in our performance, basically because we simply couldn't attract people to come and work in the partnership. And even when we did, government during the course of last year changed the qualifications in order to be accredited building control officers, and it took our staff far too long to get the accreditations they required. So we've had a number of problems, but I can promise the committee that we are completely aware of what those problems are, and we're seeking to develop a business plan to address.
I wonder what nationally was. We used to be sure there's a problem with environmental health officers many years ago, and then there's the recruiting and changes were made. And the same here. But you've said the opposite. That's what the government was doing to help, and you've said the political problem in the way there with the accreditations and so on. Is there anything nationally that's happening, or can't it be left to local councils?
And so this is not the only service, Chair, that councils are finding themselves competing with the private sector, and that's why, again, I'm bound to say this, aren't I? Mm-hmm. Our model is so important, and having the ability to have an organisation like LWM that can do things wholly differently.
Okay. No, that's yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Very good. So, and that's 56.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. 56 to 59.
Great.
To make it quicker. The on procurement and commissioning, and accept that this may be coming to us late and things may have improved. There are 8 KPIs there, only 2 of them are green. They're either amber, red or grey because there's no baseline. And particularly egregious to me because it's been something I'm passionate about is local procurement. That we've been failing very badly there on page 57. Our targets pretty poor to begin with, but we're not achieving it at all locally. And we maybe need to be doing things differently. There's some narration there about how it might be done differently, but to be more focused on that. I'll speak more about it when we come on to procurement strategy itself. But also on page 59, specifically on number of exemptions to contract procedure rules, that's been increasing, not reducing. And clearly we need to be doing something different there to improve that situation because we have a target of 0 and it's gone up from 17 in Q2 to 56 in Q4.
Take both of those. And the first one in terms of local procurement, I think we just need to be careful. Sometimes the data behind the statistics is perhaps more insightful than the pure number, and that can be difficult when just capturing the KPIs. Certainly for things like a leisure centre, for instance, which represents a huge procurement project for us, the number of swimming pool construction companies in Lichfield district is obviously very small. Naturally, we're likely to end up placing that business outside of the district just because of the nature of that. What we don't currently capture through the KPI, but we'll need to find a way of capturing it in future, I think, is actually the total value of the contract and all the, if we've got a main contractor who's over the border in Walsall, but then uses 15 different subcontractors from the district. The current way we'd measure that, we'd say that's actually doesn't fall within our local procurement rules, but actually clearly the value of that contract is predominantly placed with local businesses. So things like Microsoft licenses, all those things are going to take us further away from the number. And I know over that plan period, clearly we placed lots of business, leisure centre, remake, cinema, all those sorts of things that have fallen outside of that. That doesn't detract from the point that we absolutely should do more on local procurement, not taking away from that. But I think we should be careful about using the sheer statistic on it. On the exemption from procurement rules, I will be controversial and say sometimes I don't think it's a bad thing. I think sometimes we need to be fleet of foot, we need to be agile, and frankly, sometimes what works very well and goes through a process doesn't actually give us the best result for our residents or the district council. Now, obviously, we need the guardrails in place to make sure that there's no dodgy dealings going on. But actually, sometimes a process doesn't give us the right result. So we do need the flexibility to say, actually, if we need something quickly, if we're absolutely adamant that we need to go down a different route, we absolutely do need that flexibility. I'm sure Sarah Carrington behind me is giving me evils for me saying that.
If I can come back on both those points, please. The first one about the local procurement, I accept the point the leader makes through you, Chair. That big contracts like the swimming pool and Microsoft licenses, those kind of things, have to go outside the district. But there's clearly a way of structuring those contracts and making it a condition of letting those contracts that those outside suppliers use local suppliers to do some of the work, and that needs to be built into the process in some way.
So the social value policy
it needs to be recorded. So point one. Point two, on the I accept that we need to be nimble and fleet of foot, but going up from 17 to 56 seems an awful lot of nimbleness over that period of time. And if we have a target of 0, we should be aiming for 0, or else change the target to 50. If we want to.
You're right. Yeah, we need to relook at that. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm not sure what page we're on anymore, but I'll go to 55 and dealt with 56, 57. There on the the main contractor there for the leisure centre, and when I'm capturing the information that's in there. Do you want me to believe that? Believe that, though? Shall I believe it?
Believe it, yeah. If it's written down, you should.
Okay, 58. And then 59. Collins referred to these. 60, 61. 62. 63. 64. 64. Yeah, the Burnwood master plan. 65. Leave your fingers, unlikely that. Have a look. 66, 67. Oh, now page 68. Doesn't exist, I'm joking. If there's any more questions, I appreciate the answers then, time you take, especially at the beginning there with the local government review. So, yeah, thank you for that. I think that's it, really. Thank you. Now it is procurement next. Hopefully, Colin gets back into it. Right, mate.
Sorry? Good evening, Chair.
Yes, you introduce it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair, this is the annual refreshing of our procurement strategy, and obviously we present it to overview and scrutiny in advance of its consideration at the next available cabinet. And can I, at this stage, place on record my thanks to Sarah and her team, particularly for holding the fort so brilliantly while I've been very much under the cosh with revision and exams. Can I also thank Scrutiny for your assistance with this in previous years? And I'm sorry to see that Colin's had to leave his seat temporarily, because he in particular can be the recipient of my thanks. As local government procurement evolves, so too does our approach to it. And so we do formally review this annually. Like every document that I bring to this committee, it's a living document. But Scrutiny have previously offered some real insight into best practice elsewhere. And I'm aware that Councillor Ball has particular expertise in this, and so I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say this evening. The document, though, is strategically aligned, it is focused locally, and I can confirm it is in conformity with and supports the document you have already scrutinised this evening, being the 2050 strategy. It's also building on some earlier foundations, and we have had significant engagement with stakeholders and other partners, with internal audit and with the evolving approaches to the Procurement Act, as more and more parts of that have come on stream. I think most recently some sections were brought in February of this year. There are at least 2 or 3 sections which are still not yet law, despite the statute having been made in 2023. And so it is very much a moving target. But as far as we are aware, we are in line with national best practice. We incorporate the National Target Operating Model framework, as well as learning from examples in other local authorities. Chair and committee, the central elements of this strategy is really to place the addition of social value at every stage of our contracting. And that is very much the heart of our procurement activity. It's also, incidentally, the area where we think we can have the greatest impact. Every single new contracting activity that this council carries out has an opportunity to drive local jobs growth, to develop the skills of local people, to bring environment and quality of life benefits, and to generally improve the lot of the residents of this district. And we've definitely already seen benefits in this area, with additionality brought in with contracts. Chair, you've already referred to the coordinate demolition, which led to significant funding for a local youth dance school and opportunities that those kids would not otherwise have had. But also can I pay tribute to Stepnell, who are working on the Leisure Centre and about whose contributions in support at the Regimental Museum, at Chase Terrace Academy, and whose work in education mentoring we were able to talk about in communications issued late last week. Those are delivered through an initiative that we've chosen to call Our Community Can, which reports on progress, but also gives us the opportunity via our website for members of the community to volunteer ideas for things they'd like us as a council to focus on. And that then feeds into the contractual additionality points from which we derive social value benefits and social value contributions from contractors that we're working with. And that area of our website was recently refreshed, and published with some further details. And members, as active councillors, I'm sure you will all cascade those to your communities and residents where you can, because we really want to hear from people about what you need. because there is a fair chance that even if we can't do it, we know people who can, and we can contract that in as we procure skills and procure projects that can really bring those opportunities through for the district. Elsewhere within the policy, and just touching on the governance of the procurement team, we've made sure that procurement sits very firmly within the finance department, because we feel that finance is best placed to ensure compliance with the policy, and also to make sure that we are making timely payments and keeping our end up, particularly with small and medium enterprises and local suppliers. And I will commend them for their efforts to date of bringing that metric above the 90% KPI, which it was stubbornly below for a number of years, but in the last 12 months, I think we've been in every quarter. You'll also see, members, this strategy has an updated KPI scorecard. It's on page 80. They are designed to meet our obligations and to drive excellence, and are, again, an evolution of the previous KPIs. The new policy is more robust than the last one, and combined with better and more proactive monitoring, it is designed to give a clearer line of sight between the wider council and security activity, which should foster better governance across the entire authority. Members who attended Cabinet may be aware that I'm more than a little bit uncomfortable with the number of exemptions to procedure rules in the previous financial year. I know that the Chief Executive is aware of that because I've told him. And that any further issues will need to be addressed with the procurement team to satisfy that policy. I will say, for the benefit of the leader, who I know sits behind me, the urgency exemption in Schedule 5 of the Procurement Act is doing some really heavy lifting on this one. It cannot continue. That will need addressing, because I feel, and my reading of that schedule, is that that is designed for truly urgent projects that really have to be procured very urgently. It isn't necessarily designed for the avoidance of clawback of government funds, but may have been used in that way. That metric is overseen by the Audit Committee, but obviously it is on the table tonight. So if I do need to speak more to it, I will do. And touching on the issue of the amount percentages procured within the district, the leaders already touched on the fact that some of that is due to the nature of the work that we're procuring. Some of that is due to the value of the work that we're procuring, where large contracts on that metric have a risk of tipping the scales so that other very good stuff that we're doing isn't necessarily met. But some of it is also on the accessibility of the data, because if we're contracting with a large national company, we don't necessarily have access to the details of how much they're procuring within the district. That is likely to be difficult to obtain, because I've looked, in fact, as Colin, as you were engaging with that issue, I looked in the Procurement Act about whether there were any actual powers that gave us to require that information. And as far as I can see, there are not. And so, while we may consider placing it in as a contractual term, as an express contractual term, you must buy 25% within the district, 50% within the district, that is likely to be difficult to enforce just on the availability of the data that we can get. Members at Cabinet, or members who attended Cabinet, might also recall we considered more generally that our approach to procurement activity has now become well embedded within the council. It is maturing, but we recognise it's not fully there yet. And so I feel that this updated strategy will go some way to making positive local procurement far more centrally sited within this council, and builds on what we're doing. And we are a significant way above our original baselines, and that is it's not in this report, I'm afraid, it's in the Cabinet report. But we've come on in steady steps since we started tracking this, I think 3 years ago. We're probably not quite where we want to be yet, but we're making some quite substantial progress. Sarah, is there anything that I've missed that you need to deal with or pick up on?
I think just in terms of the KPIs as well, so we have changed the measure in terms of the exemptions. So rather than it being a baseline of 0, it's now set at 15% of the procurement activity throughout the year. There are reasons why we do have some exemptions that go through, but we do try and make sure that we go through.
Okay, thank you. Russ had a question earlier, I think, so for Braga.
Yes, and I'm sorry if I missed this, as I had to go out for a couple of minutes. I can see about the social value and the bigger companies doing stuff, and I think that's good. But to my mind, more importantly, is local companies supplying the council. And where it says engage and support suppliers, I'm interested to know what that support is and how that engagement is, because I think that's key, that actually some of these small companies, which might even grow into bigger companies, need some help to be contracting with the council.
I'm sure that Sarah can speak to the work that Jared and the team have been doing in terms of actually upskilling companies to really engage with us.
So I could give an example. So we've recently awarded a quite a large framework for disabled facilities grants. And as part of that, we were really keen to have some of the smaller, more local contractors on the framework and not just the large national ones. So as part of that, there's a few ways that we try to make sure that we encourage and attract those smaller contractors to get onto the framework. And that was firstly by the way that we designed the framework. So we made sure that we broke it down into very small lots, whether that was on the type of works that we wanted them to do, and then also by region. We also then as well tried to make the tender documents as simplified as possible. Tried to eliminate any jargon in there as well. But what we also did as well was hold a breakfast briefing session. So we advertised that on LinkedIn, and we tried to go to like food centres and really made sure that they came onto that call. And we just tried to encourage and say, we're really interested, we're really keen for you to join, to apply to get onto the framework, sort of talk through the process, what they should expect from us and what we expect from them in terms of being able to apply. And also just gave reassurance that actually until the deadline, until the tender closes, you still have the ability, if you're not sure, to raise clarification questions. So as part of that, it went really, really well, and we have got smaller local contractors onto that framework, and we recognise that there is a really big opportunity for them, as you said, to really do really well off it as well. And it is a national framework that can be used by other local authorities as well. So it's a great opportunity for some of the smaller contractors.
Thanks. Colin, if I bring you in, can I just recommend you watch this programme again, but from 7:58, where you'll find yourself being praised by the cabinet member while you were out the room, but he wasn't you were out the room, but you were out the room when he was praising you. 7:58 into the recording. Okay. Question, please.
I'm pleased to see that the cabinet members a less cavalier approach to contract exemptions than the leader has, which is what I would expect. And also to hear that we do have a changed target, because I think it makes sense to sometimes to break the rules in order to move forward very quickly or do things slightly differently. So I think that's a good way forward. I'm also pleased that we're making some progress on local procurement. It's only taken 5 or 6 years since the initial motion that my former ward partner and I put to the council for a procurement strategy to be focused on local procurement.
Ramsey Ward, colleague.
That it's moving forward. Sorry?
Ramsey Ward, colleague.
He was demoted.
That's what I always believe. It's always a demotion in my view.
But and the cabinet member said on local procurement and the targets generally, the metrics are tougher. Not as far as the percentage of spend in literal district is concerned, it's still 12%. And we've achieved less than half that over the period of time. I think it's commendable what's been done in terms of these local initiatives. I think monitoring what people do could simply be a case of asking them. So, why not, if we say to people, we want you to do 20% of your business, 25% of your business that we give you with local contractors or local providers, why can't we simply ask them to tell us what they've done? We have to trust them to be honest, but but we have to. That's a metric we could use to measure progress in terms of what is being provided locally. We'd also break our bigger contracts down into smaller contracts, so it's easier for smaller businesses to tackle them. I just think it's not a very ambitious target, 12% in the district locally, particularly as we haven't achieved it. We need to be, the leaders always talking about ambitious targets and pushing the boundaries. Let's see some of that here, please.
While I'm inclined to agree that 12% may not be the most ambitious target,
I think it's set where it is because of the nature of the business that it involves. I know the leader's already dealt with software licensing and things like that, that we do have to deal with bigger suppliers. I'd also question the sense of making harder a target that's already not being achieved. My perception of that from my old probation days is that that's simply setting the team up to fail, and that's not a style that I'd be keen to go for. You're right, we could simply ask, and if we get the information, then great. My point earlier is that we simply don't have the teeth with which to extract that information if someone doesn't want to volunteer it necessarily. And so I have reluctance to build that into the KPI when we may never be able to get the details. I hear what you're saying and I agree with a lot of it, but the practicality may be beyond this authority at this stage.
Okay, I've got Paul and then Sue next.
Okay,
Then Miles.
my question's been answered.
Yeah, I was just going to,
One by accident.
I was just going to say, I was listening to what you were saying, Sarah. That sounds very positive about those procurement initiatives. The Procurement Act 25, as I understand it, one of the key thrusts of that is to make it easier for small, medium-sized enterprises to contract with local and central government. Could there be more put into this strategy to pull out those themes? Are there any other sort of policy areas that could be developed with that bit of legislation in mind? Because I didn't see any specific references. What you were saying, that sounds great, but should that not be built into the strategy with that new bit of legislation?
You could definitely build something, and I think another enabler that we've had through the new Act is the ability to design our tender processes differently. Under the old Act, there was 5, and to be honest, only 2 were mainly utilised, and that's because there wasn't enough information, I think, on how to properly run those processes. There's a lot more guidance now, and there's a lot more flexibility in designing those processes, which will be a lot more SME friendly. So we'll have to be using those absolutely where we can.
Miles, then the next please.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about guiding principles in the strategy document. So on the page 78 of the bundle, page 4 of the strategy, particularly looking in the middle of the page, there's a list of bullet points there. Includes procurement that has these positive effects. I think, I wouldn't disagree with any of those. I think they're really good, obviously. But I had a query about, there'll often be times, if you're talking about procurement, selecting bids that give good value for local residents, that add social value, that help sustainability, then presumably a lot of times then those will be pointed in different directions. So I just wondered, this strategy is silent on how you choose and what your priorities are in individual. Is it set out elsewhere? But I just wondered if you could help me understand, what do you do when those are in conflict?
I'll be led by Sarah on how many times we've seen it actually be in conflict. But so far as social value elements are, that's covered within the social value policy, which states that it forms a percentage part of every single contract that we enter into. Between 10 and 25% of any contract can have a social value element, depending on the value of that contract. We are required by statute to consider these bullet points when we're carrying out those activities. And so, yes, okay, we've picked them out as this. These are all nice to have. We're also legally obliged to look at these sorts of things when we're carrying out that activity. In terms of when we've found them in conflict and had to make a choice, I'm going to have to ask Sarah to deal with the practical point of that.
So we haven't really had any instances where there have been conflicting, but the guidance that we're given is that when we're asking for social value commitments as part of our contract, they should be relevant and proportionate to the contract itself. So generally what we find is that when we're asking for social value commitments as part of the contract, they do tend to relate to the subject matter as much as possible. And in that way, that's where we'll score it slightly higher, or if it's in the particular team or department. So I think that's the way that we tend to look at it. So it's the questions are around, so for example, with the Coordon contract and the demolition of the car park, we found that the points were scored higher where they were talking about minimising waste and recycling of the demolition of the car park. And for Stecknell, for example, it scored really highly on the spend within the local area. So again, going back to that KPI, it probably is higher than what we've got it recorded at, and we do have to make sure that we put some work into making sure that we're getting that information from the suppliers directly. So yeah, that's.
So when you talk about scoring points, you obviously have a matrix that you apply. So it's not always the cheapest bid. It's one that will, as you say, dispose of waste better or have that impact.
Yeah, it's the best bid given the various criteria that are across what is actually quite a complex playing field.
Right.
But this forms an element of every single one.
Thank you. Anne, please.
I had a question about page 8 about the strategic the number of tenders with social value criteria of annual procurement exercise. I was going to say it looks low, but I think it's I think I just don't understand what the 10% means, given the sort of narrative around social value everywhere. What the target means.
I think we've partly answered that, but do you want to clear it up? Because it's probably not expressed as well as we could do.
It's probably me, but yeah, it's just what it means concretely.
So we've only really been making sure that we put in social value commitments in our contracts for the last 12 months properly, where we're following up on it and making sure that they're being delivered. So this is our first year of setting a baseline really for us to say this is the amount of contracts we expect to have social value commitments in. Again, we have to make sure that it's relevant and proportionate to the contract. We can't always include it in contracts where it's not relevant to do so. So for us, we've said that where it is relevant, for all of the procurements that we do in a year, we want at least 10% of that number to have commitments in terms of social value delivery. We think it will be higher than that, but we did have to just set a baseline against what we've achieved last year. But we think it will be much better this year. And
so it's 10% of the number of contracts, not 10% of the value of contract. Yeah, okay, thank you.
And in terms of benchmarking, if it does transpire that 10% is it is so low that we've exceeded specifically, we'll be looking at remarking that benchmark to set ourselves a challenge.
And you'll be able to say you're the most improved council for
I couldn't possibly come.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. On page 71, before we go on to the strategy, a paragraph here that I've not been able to decipher, but which is 3.12, 3.12. I won't read it out, but I didn't understand it really. I wonder if we could explain.
Yes, Chair, this relates to the maturity scores that were on the document that went to Cabinet and which we probably should have appended to this. It's our self-marking of how aware are we across the entire authority of all the different elements that we should be doing. And so this paragraph 3.12 deals with the scores achieved and how we've marked ourselves. It's out of a score of 1 to 5. This year we were consistently in the 3s, but it's some substantial progress since 2020 when we were consistently 1 or 2 because we were just learning about this.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. It's my excuse is there's no appendix. See?
We can rectify that, Chair. I'm sure we can have that appendix.
No, I just wanted to excuse that. On 3.14 at the bottom there, benchmarking best practice from local authorities. How is that done? How do we do that? We just matter of desktop research that somebody has, or regularly, or
we certainly keep an eye on what's happening across the sector, and I know that Preston have been a particular trailblazer in this, and our model is, I am told, extremely close to the model that's adopted very successfully by Preston, and it's one that I look forward to seeing develop in similar ways. There's certainly been very visible and demonstrable benefits for that authority. But if we see other good practice elsewhere, I know that incorporate as much as we can.
I think Sue was looking for prestatin, so Didn't get very far.
I'm afraid I don't know what they're doing.
If I got,
mention Preston.
if I got the procurement and commissioning strategy, then I just touch on that one. That's the overview there on page 76. Just this section here, which is the put the customer first, improve and innovate, respect everybody, and there's very good bullet points following all those. How do you measure? How do you ensure you're doing this? I mean, what's the process that you use for that? I mean, just a list of things there, but I just wondered how you get going back to it and saying, are we doing that? Some measure. You may well have one, but
Well, these are largely drawn out in the KPIs in the previous document as well, isn't it? So we're reporting, because this is a supporting document for that plan, these are borne through in those KPIs.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions on those 2 pages? 78, 79, the rest of the strategy? If not, I think that's it. Thank you. I hope the questions were helpful there, and thanks for the answers. And
No, there's no else. Obviously, you know where we are.
yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. I believe agenda item 9 is next. It's my agenda item 9, which is the work programme. I've got that. It's just the agenda I seem to have lost somewhere. Do you want to speak on this first?
I can do, yeah, just to say there's one change since the last meeting, which is the medium-term financial strategy item that was due to be looked at the November meeting of ONS. We've taken that off simply because the data won't be available at that point in the process. I've taken that advice from our section 151 officer. However, the committee will absolutely, of course, have the opportunity to discuss the MTFS at the meeting before in September and the subsequent meeting in January as well.
Okay. Homeless and housing and homeless strategy. Do you want to say something more on that, Colin? Now,
please. I mean, the officers confirmed that any draft would be brought back to ONS before being taken to cabinet. That's to do with the empty homes policy, and it's down on the 3rd page of the work plan as a briefing paper. Given the fact that we've made virtually no progress on this, and we've seen the KPIs earlier, that a lot of work still to be done, maybe this should be an actual discussion rather than simply a briefing paper, so that we can interrogate it. We had a very good interrogation when it was first presented to us in draft as an idea. Lots of positive suggestions were made. I think before it goes to cabinet for decision, it's worth reviewing it here in this forum again. So I'd ask that as a possibility, please.
No, we can't. I can't answer because you've talked to me, and he can't answer because you've talked. You said that last bit again. I'm very sorry.
Can we?
We're trying to find out about. We're trying to help you, but
can we have the empty home strategy in draft form come here before it goes to cabinet, rather than simply as a briefing paper, please?
Put that a little bit later. We're trying to work out. Over the page then, there's local government organisation is the same September meeting. On the planning performance progress on the next page for I mean, I think we could have another quarter report then on the 18th of September meeting on the planning performance progress. So I think that would be another quarter, and I'd just like to see if it is on track and as wanted. I think that should be straightforward.
Relay that.
Okay. Sorry, Sue.
Yeah, just on the last page, the briefing papers. On the Greenway project, it was the January 2025 ONS meeting that asked for an update. Well, 7 months down the line since then, and there's been some activity. Not all of it is conclusive, but it would be really helpful either to have an early briefing paper or for, say, a September meeting to have an update report on it.
Chair, yeah, please. Helpful. I know she was thinking of you if she wasn't looking at them. So,
September might be too late. In that
briefing paper early then.
Yeah, I mean, if it's okay, I think I'd rather get a briefing note out ahead of time circulated by email, because the intention is that public have access by early September, and I wouldn't want to spring that. I wouldn't want to bring a briefing paper knowing full well that we may have let the public on there and getting some ribbon.
Thanks, Sue.
That's really helpful. So we're due to have that within the next 2 or 3 weeks, possibly then.
Yeah, whoever's got the action tracker, if they could stick that there, and
that would be
the next fortnight, absolutely.
and particularly in relation to the expenditure so far and the budget that's allocated, that would be helpful.
I'm sure Will's got that. Yeah, right. Ordered.
On the same subject, I bet.
Yeah, on the Greenway. I mean, I obviously you know more about it than I do, but as I understand, there are quite a few potential liabilities, and I think it's quite important that councillors see that and have a say about what they're committing to, assuming there are big liabilities that we have to commit to, rather than it just happening and being reported. Now, I know it's been a very long process and there have been different advice from insurance at different times, and you know, I'm not blaming anybody for that, that it's got to be done properly. But if we as councillors are committing to certain liabilities, I think it's only right that we have the say in that, rather than it happening outside of the council process.
Entirely agree, and that's why the cabinet decision was written in a way that the cabinet member decision limit is £150,000. Cost or liability of less than that, it will sit with the cabinet member as per any other decision. If the liability exceeds that, it will go through OE and Scrutiny Cabinet full council as any other decision would. So we've built that caveat in there to make sure if the liabilities are of a sufficient number, they will absolutely go through the correct process.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to do that?
Yeah, sorry, it's on a
Yes.
back on another topic.
That's okay.
On housing and homelessness strategy, I said right at the beginning of the meeting, I talked about the delivery plan for the housing and homelessness strategy. But it hadn't come before us at that point when we discussed it. I had met with the staff team. They said they're happy to share it with me. And I wonder whether that should be a briefing paper to us before it goes to cabinet, so that we can see the I's dotted and T's crossed before we before that moves forward, to make sure it's robust enough, deliverable.
You'll help Colin sleep better tonight if you say yes, won't you?
I feel like your committee's smelt blood now, Chair, and I'm going to be put on the hook for all sorts of things. Let me find out. I'm not as close to that, Colin, because I know that Councillor Farrell's leading on that. If we can get that together quickly, then I absolutely agree that would be helpful. I just don't want to commit to something that I don't know if it's achievable or not, and I'm just being really candid there.
I mean, we've all said the homeless and housing and homelessness strategy is a great top level document. It's clear, it's very challenging, it's robust, we support it. I think the delivery of it, as always, the devil is in the detail. And I think knowing what some of that detail is and how it's being delivered would give us comfort that actually we'll achieve these grand ambitions.
So just for my benefit and perhaps to help Will as well, what's the exact ask?
That we see the delivery plan for the housing and homelessness strategy, please.
They've got time to lobby. I think your views known if. Okay.
Yeah, understood. Right. Thanks.
That's it. And if I was aware, thank everybody's input into the scrutiny committee and for the responses we've had from cabinet members and others. And wish you well. Oh, yeah, the Euros. Oh, don't tell me what that. Don't tell me what's happened. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Be careful.